Hello, and welcome to healthyhouseplants.com, where we teach you all about gardening in the great indoors. If you'd like to support our show, please use our Amazon affiliate link below. Today we are going to talk about growing succulents indoors. This can also be applied to cactus. I've had some viewers ask about growing succulents indoors. Naturally TKJ was one of those subscribers that asked about that, so thank you for asking about that. I believe Christina, you also asked about that. So I'm going to talk to you about how to keep your succulents happy and healthy in your indoor garden. And we'll likely be doing future videos and more in-depth and drilling down various areas as well. So for today, overview on growing them. So one of the great things about growing them is they make a really nice decorator design element for your indoor garden. The Sansevieria, this one beautiful plant, very architectural. I really like this plant too. At night, if you have some lighting on that will cast shadows, the shadow of this guy on a wall, against a wall, a backdrop of some sort, looks really pretty. And here is a jade that's growing really nicely too. Jades do really well indoors. So the succulents can do really well indoors, providing that you follow a few rules to keep them happy and healthy. So really there's one way to kill a succulent, and that is with too much water. So unlike many other house plants, you only need to water your succulents once or twice a month. And if sometimes it may only be once a month. It depends on where the plant's located in your home. It depends on your climate. I have a video on how your outdoor climate does affect your indoor climate for your plants. So keep that in mind as well. The best way to add moisture to them is you can wait until they are very dry. Another thing you can do is when you wait until they're very dry, then you can go ahead and soak them, let the water run through the pot, and then do not water them again until they're very dry. So I'm going to show you. This guy, I believe, is ready for watering. He is registering in 1. So he is ready for watering. This one I don't think is yet. This one is still, it's registering around 3 in some areas. I do have a video on it's registering 1 there, so it just depends. Moving it around a little bit, especially with the succulents, you do want to. So you see it's registering a little bit in the green, so I'm going to wait a little bit longer on this one. With succulents, you definitely want to check a lot of the areas of the soil because you may have a wet pocket and then the other parts are dry, so keep that in mind with them. This guy though, it's been a while since he watered and he's registering 1 all the way around. So you can either, as mentioned, soak them really well, make sure they dry out really well. You don't want them to sit in any moisture in the container, in their outer container ever. You can also mist them. So do a fine mist on them, and as you soak them, that will go ahead and water the soil itself, and it will give them a little bit of moisture. So keeping in mind that the succulents come from a desert environment where they get a downpour of rain very infrequully, they take up all the water they can and store it in their thick succulent leaves until they get more moisture. So so you want to mimic, whenever you can, growing your houseplants indoors, Mother Nature, and how the houseplants that you're growing grow naturally outdoors. I prefer to do the soaking when the plant is definitely dry, letting the bottom of the pot, like I mentioned, dry out really well. You can put it on a paper towel or something, let it soak it up, an old rag, let it soak up the moisture really well. If you want to be extra careful, you can put it on something like a cake pan when you take the cake out of the oven, you put the cake pan on there or the cookies on there to cool. You can do that just to make sure everything's dried out really well before you put it back in your container. to make sure that you keep the plant from getting any rot. What'll happen when your succulent or your cactus gets rot is it will become squishy at the base. The leaves will become squishy, and it will become squishy at the base of the plant. The base of the plant where the plant and the soil meet will become squishy. At that point, you've got a rot thing going on. It's actually a crown rot there. I have another video on that. And the plant is usually on its way out. So you can let it dry out. I have a video on what to do if you let a plant, if you overwater a plant. You can let it dry out and see if it'll come back for you. It may come back. Part of it may die and the other part may live. So there are ways to save your overwatered succulents. And then moving forward, not to overwater them. So some people might be alarmed with this plant, especially seeing it in the one. I could honestly go another day or two without watering this plant and it will still be fine, because that's how little water, I should say little, not very often that these succulents need watering. They don't need it that often. When you do water, like I said, go ahead and soak, but then wait until they are definitely dry in between before watering again. A lot of times that's the hardest thing for people to do because they're worried it's going to die because it doesn't have enough water. And that is the case with a lot of houseplants, but not with succulents. Okay, so what else do you need? You do need good lighting for them. So they need at least 8 hours a day of a bright filtered light. So something from an eastern exposure window is nice. Southern exposure, western can work as long as it's a few feet back because it does get a little bit hot, but keep in mind too that 8 hours. So if your eastern window only gets the light in say 3 or 4 hours in the morning and then it's gone, you're going to want to use full spectrum lighting as a supplemental lighting for your succulents as well. So full spectrum lighting, it comes in all kinds of bulbs. You can put it all kinds of fixtures. It simulates daylight and it will work really well for your succulents to keep them nice and healthy and growing really well. This guy I do have in a western window, and him too, and they do very well there. When it gets very hot towards, especially during the summer months, and I'm in Southern California, I will close the blind midway through the day after I know they've gotten a nice 8 hours of sunlight. So that's another option, is having them in that western window and closing it in the late afternoon, mid to late afternoon, so that it doesn't get too much hot sun. They don't like, succulents also don't like, and cactus don't like extremes. So they don't like going from hot to freezing cold, etc. So generally keeping them in the 65 to 85 degrees Fahrenheit range for you throughout the year, that 20-degree span, and then it gradually changes throughout the seasons. That works just fine. You will need to prune them every once in a while. So if a leaf is starting to go, you want to cut it off at the base of the plant, so up against the stem. Don't cut into the stem, the main trunk, but do get close. That will stimulate more growth from down there. A lot of them grow from the center here, so even by cutting one out here, it's going to cause new growth to come from the center. You do want to repot them. Occasionally, they do need repotting. What you want to use is a palm and cactus mix, or you can use a mix that has some water retention, but also good drainage. Add some pumice to the mix if it needs more drainage, and I do have a great pumice product. The link is below. So fertilizing the succulents, you do want to fertilize them occasionally. They aren't really big feeders because in their native habitats there's not a ton of fertilizer around, but occasionally fertilizing them is a good thing. Use an organic fertilizer, a pretty all-purpose fertilizer works, and you can also use a cactus. There's the cactus and succulent mix as well that works really well. And make sure to not over fertilize your plants. So do it about every 2 months, and when you do mix up the fertilizer, use it at half strength, especially initially if you haven't been fertilizing for a while, so you don't shock the plant with too much nutrients. So that's something else to keep in mind as well. The rarely getting pests and diseases on these. The disease would be the crown rot or root rot, but otherwise pests, they don't tend to attract too many of those, so that's usually not a problem. If you do have a problem with pests and pests, especially, it generally means that the plant is being overwatered, or it's not getting enough sunlight, or both, and it's in a weakened state. Weakened plants will tend to attract pests more often. So look at your cultivation regimen when you see pests and diseases to make sure that everything's good with that. They've got good lighting, not being overwatered, not sitting in wet, etc., to determine if that is the reason why your plant succumbed to the pests in the first place. That is it for growing succulents indoors. Thank you for stopping by today. Please leave any comments about any indoor gardening tutorials you'd like to see. Remember to like, comment, subscribe, and share this video. And please check the bell if you'd like to be notified when new videos are released.